They mocked the limping nurse, called her slow, a problem, the turtle. But what if that limp isn't weakness at all? What if it's the receipt for someone else's survival? Because tonight in a fluorescent ER where people bleed quietly behind curtains and power hides behind polished white coats, a Navy SEAL captain is about to stop an entire hospital cold and salute her in front of everyone. Picture it rain hammering the ambulance bay in Bayport, Virginia. The waiting room packed with coughs, phone screens, and tired eyes. A woman in loose scrubs drags her left leg down the hall pretending she doesn't hear the snickers. She's done this for years. She's learned to endure. But endurance has a limit. And when chaos kicks the doors in, you're going to see who freezes, who lies, and who saves a life with hands that have done it before. Stay with me to the end. Then hit like comment where you're watching from and tell me, have you ever been underestimated when it mattered most? The question she left hanging in the air did not need an answer right away. In Harborview Memorial, answers came later, if they came at all. What mattered was the sound that followed her down the corridor, steady as a pulse impossible to ignore. Thud, drag, thud, drag. The west wing of Harborview was old enough to remember when nurses wore starched caps and doctors still wrote orders on paper. Bayport's salt air seeped into the building through every crack carried in by sliding doors that never quite sealed. On rainy mornings, the place smelled like wet asphalt, and antiseptic, like the ocean had crawled into the vents and decided to stay. Nora Caldwell moved through it all as if she belonged to the architecture. She did not rush. She did not apologize. She did not perform the cheerful sparkle people expected from someone in scrubs. She simply worked, and the work took the shape of her. Her scrubs hung a little loose, the fabric soft from too many industrial washes. The fit was not vanity. It was armor. Under the left pant leg, strapped tight against thigh and knee, was a brace that bit into skin no matter how carefully she adjusted it. The orthopedic shoes on her feet were plain black, thick-soled, ugly, in a way that made young staff avert their eyes as if ugliness could spread. A pair of nurses stood near the supply room sipping coffee from paper cups. When Nora passed, one of them lowered her voice like she was sharing a secret. She's back on the floor again. The other nurse made a face. Why do they keep letting her? Nora kept walking. She did not slow down. She did not speed up. Her gaze stayed forward, fixed on the corner ahead, as if that patch of wall held something she needed more than dignity. In Trauma Bay 3. The morning had already turned mean. A construction worker with a crushed hand sat pale and shaking his breath, coming in sharp pieces. The resident assigned to him was a second year with tired eyes and a scalp still pink from his last haircut. He kept glancing at the clock as if time itself was a rival. "Pain's at 10, the patient said, voice cracking. "I can't feel my fingers." The resident nodded too quickly. "We'll get you something." He turned to the computer fingers tapping, then stopped. His brow furrowed. He looked at the medication drawer, then at the screen again, then back to the patient. His uncertainty grew louder than the monitor. Nora stepped in without making a sound. She set a tray down. Her hands were not pretty hands. The knuckles were thick. The skin was calloused. There were old, pale scars that caught the light when she moved. She did not ask permission. She did not need to. "Let me see," she said, quiet. The resident bristled on instinct. "I've got it." Nora did not argue. She simply read the screen once, eyes flicking with the speed of someone used to scanning numbers under stress. "That dose is for a man twice his size," she said. The resident blinked. "No, it's the standard order set." Nora's fingers tapped one line. "Standard order set assumes no renal compromise. Look at his creatinine from intake." The resident's face changed. His posture shifted from defensive to embarrassed in one breath. "Right," he muttered. "Okay." Nora turned to the patient. Her voice softened not with sweetness but with clarity. "Sir, we're going to get your pain down. We're going to watch your hand. We're going to keep you safe while we do it." The man swallowed hard. "You promise?" Nora did not offer comfort like a slogan. She placed her palm on the edge of the bed, steadying the metal frame the way she steadied rooms. "I promise I'll stay on you," she said. "You won't be alone in here." As she moved toward the IV, her limp pulled at her a reminder that every step cost something. But her hands did not cost. Her hands were certain. She found a vein on the first attempt without drama. The needle slid in smooth. The patient's shoulders sagged, relief starting to spread, and his eyes followed her like she was the only solid thing in the room. "You're good," he whispered. Nora did not smile. She did not take the compliment. She secured the line, taped it clean, and turned away. At the doorway, Dr. Cameron Slate watched, as if he were studying a flaw in a machine. Slate carried himself like a man who expected doorways to widen for him. His coat was tailored. His hair was cut with sharp lines. The badge on his lapel gleamed. People called him doctor like it was a title he'd been promised at birth. At 33, he was already chief resident, the kind of appointment that made older physicians either impressed or irritated. Slate used that irritation the way other men used cologne as proof he mattered. Behind him hovered 3 interns' clipboards hugged to chests, eyes bright with the hunger to belong. They trailed him like shadows trying to learn how to take shape. Slate stepped into the bay, gaze still on Nora. Caldwell. Nora did not turn immediately. She finished taping the line. She checked the drip. Only then did she look up. "Yes, doctor." Slate's eyes flicked to the patient, then back to Nora's shoes. His mouth curled slightly, almost a smile, almost not. "You're assigned to West Wing trauma today," he said. "Not the minor bays." "I'm aware," Nora replied. "You took too long," Slate said. The resident opened his mouth to speak, maybe to defend her, maybe to save his own pride. Nora lifted a hand gentle, stopping him without touching. Slate continued, letting the words land for the interns. "Efficiency is the difference between living and dying," he said. "It's not personal, it's math. You are not fast." Nora's gaze did not drop. Her expression stayed neutral, but the muscles in her jaw tightened under the skin like a door locking. "I completed the task," she said. Slate stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to make it feel intimate and cruel. "You complete tasks the way an old computer loads a web page. Eventually." One intern snickered a short laugh that died when Nora's eyes flicked in his direction. He looked away fast. Nora turned back to the patient, adjusted the blanket, and moved on. She did not give Slate the satisfaction of a reaction. That was the trick with men like him. They fed on opposition. They grew louder when challenged. They went quiet only when starved. As she left the bay, she heard Slate behind her loud again for the audience. "Some people are better suited for slower environments," he said. "Clinics. Paperwork. Maybe a volunteer desk." In the corridor, Maya Rhodes stood by the med cart pretending to count syringes she had already counted. Maya was 24, fresh enough that her scrubs still held their color after washes. Her hair was pulled into a bun that never stayed perfect. She had the kind of face that revealed what she felt even when she tried to hide it. When Nora approached, Maya's hands paused. "I'm sorry," Maya whispered. Nora's eyes flicked to her. "For what?" "For him," Maya said, voice thin. "For that." Nora looked down the hall where Slate's laughter floated like smoke. "He's not the first," Nora said. Maya swallowed. "I don't get it. Everyone sees what you do. You're the one who fixes things when the room starts falling apart." Nora's mouth pressed into a line. "Then keep your eyes open," she said. Maya's brows pinched. "That's it." Nora leaned closer just enough that Maya could smell the coffee on her breath, the sterile soap on her hands. "That's it," Nora said. Eyes open, mouth shut, hands steady. Maya nodded, chastened, but her gaze followed Nora like a tether. Later, the shift turned the way it always did in a trauma center, not with one dramatic event, but with 1,000 small pressures that added up to a breaking point. A teenager with a stab wound to the thigh came in pale and angry, cursing at anyone who tried to touch him. A woman with a swollen face insisted she fell downstairs, eyes flicking to her boyfriend every time she spoke. An elderly man in atrial fibrillation kept asking where his wife was, even after they told him she had died last year. The waiting room filled with the sounds of modern suffering, coughs that rattled, babies that screamed, people arguing with insurance on speakerphone, a paramedic snapping gum while he listed symptoms like he was reading off a grocery list. The overhead pages cracked and popped names and codes spilling into the air. Nora moved through it all, her limp making her visible in a way she would have preferred not to be. Every time her foot dragged, it made a sound. Every time it made a sound, someone noticed. In a place where invisibility could be safety, her body refused to let her disappear. Near the trauma desk, Slate held an impromptu lesson for the intern's voice-polished hand gesturing toward a whiteboard that still had dried marker stains from yesterday's shift. "This is why we prioritize speed," he said. "A delay is a decision." One of the interns, a tall kid with a fresh stethoscope and a voice that cracked when nervous, nodded eagerly. "What about nursing?" he asked. "I mean, like nurse response times. Is there a standard?" Slate smiled. "There is now." Nora stopped at the counter, setting down a chart with care. She did not look at them. She did not need to. She could feel their eyes on her like heat. Slate turned just enough to include her in his field of view. "Caldwell," he said, "how long does it take you to get fluids from the supply room to Bay 6? Nora's fingers remained on the chart. "Depends on the situation." Slate lifted his brows. "Answer the question." Nora looked up. 2 minutes if the hallway is clear. 4 if transport blocks the corridor. Longer if I stop to keep a patient from aspirating. A few of the nurses nearby glanced over, listening. Slate chuckled. "We're not running a philosophy seminar." 2 minutes, 4 minutes. That's the difference between a saved kidney and a dialysis bill. Nora's eyes narrowed slightly. It's also the difference between stopping a patient from choking and letting them die because the hallway is inconvenient. Silence. Not total, but enough. Slate's smile thinned. "That's a cute speech," he said. "But it's not your call." Nora did not raise her voice. "If you're standing over a patient," she said, "it becomes your call." Slate's jaw tightened. "Your job is to carry out orders," he said, "not editorialize them." Nora slid the chart across the counter neat, complete the handwriting legible. "I carried out the orders," she said, "and I prevented an airway problem." Slate stared at her, then leaned closer, voice low. "Your limp is a liability." He said the words coated in something like pleasure. "Your presence is depressing. Patients want to see vitality. They want confidence. They don't want to watch you drag yourself through their worst day." Nora blinked once. Her expression did not change, but something in her eyes cooled, turning harder, quieter. She spoke softly. "Patients want to live." Slate straightened as if physical distance reasserted authority. "Get back to work," he said, "and try not to make noise while you do it." Nora turned away, limp pronounced as she moved. She passed a little boy sitting on a gurney, arms wrapped around his knees, eyes huge above a paper mask. His mother stood beside him, twisting the strap of her purse until her fingers turned pale. The boy's gaze locked on Nora's brace visible under fabric when her pant leg pulled up slightly. He stared with the blunt honesty of children, the kind that did not intend harm but could still cause it. "Does it hurt?" he asked. His mother hissed, mortified, "Evan, don't." Nora stopped. She crouched slowly, the movement controlled, painful, her left leg refusing to bend the way it wanted to. When she was eye level with the boy, she nodded once. "Sometimes," she said. The boy leaned in. "Did you get it from a shark?" The mother's face flushed. "I'm so sorry." Nora's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Not a shark," she said. "Something else." The boy's eyes widened. "Like what?" Nora held his gaze. Her voice stayed even. "Like a day that went bad." The boy nodded like he understood. He did not really, but he felt the weight in her tone. Nora reached into her pocket, fingers brushing a small metal object on a chain, then pulled out a clean sticker from a supply packet, instead pressed it onto his sleeve. "You're brave," she said. "That's the part that matters." The boy's shoulders lifted with pride. The mother's eyes softened. As Nora stood, Maya watched from the desk, something tightening in her chest that felt like admiration and anger mixed together. Maya had come into nursing believing hospitals were built on teamwork. In the last 6 months, she had learned hospitals were also built on fear. She waited until Slate was distracted, then slipped closer to Nora. "You didn't have to take that," Maya murmured. Nora kept moving. "Yes," she said, "I did." "Why?" Nora's eyes remained forward. "Because he wants me to swing," she said. "He wants me loud. He wants me emotional. That makes it easier." Maya jogged a half-step to keep up. "Easier for what?" Nora's breath came measured. "To remove me," she said. They turned a corner. A transport bed blocked the hallway attendants arguing about where to take it. Nora adjusted her path, stepping wide, her limp worsening with the detour. Pain flashed across her face, fast controlled, like a soldier swallowing a reaction. Maya saw it. "You should sit," she said. Nora's voice stayed flat. "I sit later." In the break room, the air was warmer, thick with microwaved leftovers and burnt coffee. A poster on the wall read in bold letters, "Safety first." Underneath, someone had scribbled in pen, "Unless it costs money." Nora sat alone at the table, massaging her thigh with the heel of her hand. The brace bit into her skin under fabric. She moved her fingers around the pressure points the way someone handled a stubborn knot, trying to coax it into releasing. Her jaw was tight. Sweat dampened her hairline despite the cool room. The door creaked. A mop bucket rolled in first. Ray Ellis stepped through behind it, shoulders still squared like he was on inspection. His gray hair was cut short. His hands were big scarred in a way that looked earned. His gait had a slight hitch, nothing dramatic, but enough that anyone paying attention would notice. People who had once carried weight on their bodies rarely walked the same afterward. Ray nodded at Nora. "Mary," he said, using a name no one else used. Nora did not correct him. She never had. Ray set the mop handle against the wall and lowered himself into the chair across from her with a small grunt. His knees popped. He did not flinch. "That kid doctor is running his mouth again," Ray said. Nora stared into her coffee like it might offer answers if she waited long enough. "He's doing his job," she said. Ray snorted. "If his job is being a stain." Nora's lips pressed together. She was tired. The kind of tired that did not leave after sleep. Ray's eyes flicked to her leg. "He ever put hands on you?" he asked. Nora's gaze lifted sharp. "No." Ray held her eyes. "I saw him shoulder check you last week." Nora's jaw tightened. "He bumped into me." Ray's mouth twisted. "That's what they call it now." Nora's fingers tightened around the coffee cup. The paper crinkled slightly. "Drop it," she said. Ray leaned back, studying her with the calm patience of a man who had waited out worse storms than this. "That leg," he said quietly, "is not from a fall." Nora's eyes went distant for a split second, then returned guarded. "It's from living," she said. Ray's stare did not move. "I know what combat damage looks like," he said. "You didn't get that in a parking lot." Nora exhaled slowly through her nose. The break room hum of fluorescent lights filled the silence. "It doesn't matter where it came from," Nora said at last. "It matters that I can still work." Ray's lips pressed into a hard line. "You work better than most people in that building," he said. "And they treat you like you're contagious." Nora's gaze dropped. Her fingers rubbed her thigh again, gentler now, almost absent. Ray's voice softened, not kind exactly, but less sharp. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked. Nora stared at the coffee. "Every day." Ray nodded once as if he'd expected that. "Then why don't you—" Nora's mouth opened, then closed. She did not answer right away because the answer was not one sentence. It was 1,000 moments layered. She thought of the boy who asked about sharks. She thought of the overdose patient whose breathing had steadied when her hand found a vein. She thought of the woman who said she fell downstairs, and the way her eyes begged Nora to understand without saying it. Nora spoke finally, voice low. "Because when it gets ugly," she said, "you don't want the loudest person in the room. You want the one who stays clear." Ray's eyes narrowed slightly. "And you're that one," he said. Nora's expression did not change. "I can be." Ray leaned forward, elbows on the table. That doctor, he said he's going to push and push until you react. That's the whole play. Nora's gaze lifted, icy focused. I don't react, she said. Ray held her eyes. Everybody reacts, he replied. Nora's voice stayed flat. I endure. Ray sat back, letting that word hang. Endure. It was a word people admired until they saw what it actually required. A voice sounded in the doorway, then cheerful in a way that felt forced. There you are, Dr. Slate said. He stood with 2 interns behind him, a tablet in his hand like a weapon. His smile was smooth, practiced. It did not reach his eyes. Nora, he said, using her first name like he owned it. Break's over. Nora set the coffee down carefully, hands steady. She stood slower than most, her left leg stiff. Slate's eyes flicked to Ray, then back to Nora. We need you in Bay 6, he said. A patient is waiting. Try not to keep him alive through sheer stubbornness alone. One of the interns laughed too loudly. Nora stepped past Slate without looking at him. As she walked away, Slate called after her loud enough for the hallway to hear. You know what they say, he said. Hospitals should feel modern, not like a retirement home. Nora's shoulders did not tense. She kept moving. But inside, something shifted, small and sharp. In Bay 6, the patient was a man in his 40s with yellowed eyes and trembling hands withdrawing hard. He was sweating through the sheet. He yanked at the IV line every time it touched his skin. Get off me, he snapped when Nora approached. I'm not here to hurt you, Nora said. You're all the same, he spat. Nora's eyes tracked his hands, his breathing patterned the way his pupils flickered. She did not flinch when he swung his arm toward her. She caught his wrist gently firm, not aggressive. I'm not the same, she said. The man froze, surprised by her strength, by her calm. Nora leaned in just enough that her voice would not carry. I've seen men tear their own skin trying to crawl out of pain, she said. I'm not judging you. I'm watching you. His mouth opened, then shut. His breathing eased a fraction. Behind the curtain, Slate's voice snapped at someone irritated. The ER was a machine that never stopped, and Slate acted like he was the only one who understood that. Nora finished in Bay 6 and returned to the central desk where charts piled up like small disasters. Maya was there, eyes flicking between screens and people doing 3 things at once and still feeling behind. Slate wants you to redo your charting, Maya whispered. Nora's eyes narrowed slightly. Why? Maya's lips pressed together. He said your handwriting looks old-fashioned. Nora's mouth tightened. She took the chart. It was perfectly legible. Slate wanted her to rewrite it because making her rewrite it proved he could. Nora sat at the desk and began to chart again, careful, thorough, not giving him room to accuse her of sloppiness. Her hand moved with muscle memory. She wrote like someone trained to leave no gaps. Maya watched her for a moment, then spoke quietly. You ever think about going somewhere else? She asked. A clinic, a desk job, anything quieter. Nora did not look up. Quiet is not the same as safe, she said. Maya swallowed. But he's destroying you. Nora's pen paused once, then continued. No, she said. Pain destroys you. People just take advantage of it. Maya's eyes lowered. Why do you let him? Nora's gaze lifted, then direct. Because I know men like him, she said. And I know what they do when they get scared. Maya frowned. Scared of what? Nora's eyes held hers for a beat, then slid past her shoulder toward the corridor where a stretcher rolled by paramedics moving fast. Losing control, she said. In the early afternoon, the hospital's overhead screens began cycling a new message between triage wait times and visiting hours. Bold letters, corporate and clean. Workforce Modernization Initiative Performance Standards. Update, compliance required. Staff glanced up, then looked away. Nurses exchanged looks. A few physicians smirked. Administrators in cheap suits walked with purpose through the department, clipboards in hand like they were inspecting a factory line. Slate noticed the screens and smiled the way a man smiled when the weather turned in his favor. Nora noticed too. She did not smile. Her fingers brushed her pocket, touching the edge of the small metal coin she carried like a private anchor. She did not pull it out. She never did. Ray pushed his mop bucket past the desk eyes on Nora. He did not speak, but his look said enough. He had seen this before, not in hospitals, but in units and workplaces in any system that decided some bodies were too expensive to keep. Nora finished the rewritten charting. She stood slowly, legs stiff, and carried the paperwork to the nurse manager's box. On the way back, she passed a bulletin board she had stopped noticing years ago. Today, a new flyer had been pinned dead center, crisp paper, still smelling like ink. Mandatory evaluations. Updated physical competency review. Details to follow. Nora stared at it for a second longer than she meant to. The hallway felt colder. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, steady and indifferent. She turned away, and the brace under her scrubs tightened, as if it knew what the paper meant before she did. When she reached her locker near the staff entrance, she found it slightly ajar, like someone had been inside recently. Nora paused, hand resting on the metal door, listening to the sounds of the ER behind her. Monitors, footsteps, voices, the world moving on without permission. A white envelope sat on top of her folded scrub cap, her name typed neatly across the front. Nora's fingers closed around it without shaking. Nora held the envelope for a moment without opening it, as if weight alone could tell her what was inside. The paper was too clean. The seal was too perfect. Harborview never delivered bad news with messy edges. It delivered it like a spreadsheet. She slid a finger under the flap and pulled. The letter inside was printed on heavy stock with the hospital logo at the top. The language was polite enough to be cruel. Mandatory physical competency evaluation. Required for continued placement in acute trauma care. Failure to demonstrate safe performance may result in reassignment or termination. Nora read it once, then again slower, as if different words might appear the second time. Her eyes moved to the signature line. Dr. Cameron Slate. She exhaled through her nose, quiet, controlled. Her locker room smelled like disinfectant and damp cotton, like sweat that never quite left the walls. Somewhere beyond the door, the ER kept churning. People laughed, argued, coughed, cried. The world did not pause for a piece of paper, but Nora felt the floor tilt anyway. She folded the letter into a tight rectangle and slid it into her scrub pocket. Her fingers brushed the metal coin on the chain she kept there. Worn edges, warm from her skin, a private weight that had nothing to do with Harborview and everything to do with survival. In the hallway outside, a nurse walked past and glanced at Nora's face. "You okay?" the nurse asked, already moving. Nora nodded once. "Fine." Fine was a word you used when you did not have time to be anything else. At the central station, Slate stood with his tablet angled toward him like a shield. He spoke with the nurse manager, his voice calm, reasonable. That was the trick. He sounded like a man concerned for safety, not a man hunting a target. "Standards are changing," he said. "The board wants measurable performance. We have to protect patients and protect the hospital." The nurse manager, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes, nodded too quickly. "I understand." Slate's gaze flicked up and landed on Nora. His smile sharpened. "There she is," he said, as if she had arrived on cue. Nora approached limp, steady expression, unreadable. Caldwell Slate said. He held his tablet out slightly. "You received your notice." Nora did not glance at it. "I did." Slate lowered his voice just enough to sound almost kind. "This is routine." "It is not," Nora said. His eyes narrowed a fraction. "You want to argue policy with me?" Nora's gaze stayed on his face. "No. I want you to stop pretending." Slate's smile did not move. "I don't know what you mean." Nora leaned closer. Not aggressive, not emotional, just direct. "You want me off the floor, so do it honestly." Slate's jaw worked. For a second, something hot flashed behind his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by that smooth professionalism that made administrators trust him. "This is honest," he said. "If you're fit, you'll pass. If you're not, you'll be reassigned to a role that matches your capabilities." Nora's voice stayed flat. "You mean the gift shop?" Slate let out a soft laugh like she had made a joke. 2 p.m. Friday. Physical therapy gym. Don't be late. He turned away, already dismissing her. Maya watched from behind the desk, hands frozen over a keyboard. When Slate walked off, she stepped closer to Nora, eyes wide. 2 p.m. Friday. Maya whispered. That's when the ER is insane. Nora nodded. She did not look surprised. She looked tired. That's the point, Maya said, anger creeping into her voice. Nora's gaze flicked to Maya, calm enough to steady her. Don't make it worse, she said. How? Maya demanded. How do you not do anything? Nora's eyes softened slightly. I am doing something, she said. I'm showing up. Maya swallowed, staring at Nora's braceline under the fabric when Nora shifted her weight. Can they even make you do this? They can make you do anything, Nora said, if they call it safety. Ray Ellis rolled his mop bucket past the desk, slow, quiet. He looked at Nora's face and understood without needing to ask. He got you, Ray murmured when he was close enough. Nora did not answer. She did not need to. Ray's mouth tightened. You want me to talk to someone? Nora shook her head once. No. Ray's eyes narrowed. You always say no. Nora looked at him then, and in her stare was the truth she rarely allowed anyone to see. Because when I say yes, she said quietly, it becomes a war. Ray held her gaze for a beat, then nodded once like he understood that kind of math. He pushed his mop bucket on. Friday arrived the way bad days often did. Not with thunder, not with drama, but with a steady pressure that made everything feel heavy before it even started. Rain had been falling since dawn, tapping hard against the ambulance bay doors, turning Bayport's streets into shining black ribbon. Inside Harborview, the waiting room filled early. A toddler with a fever screamed until his voice cracked. A man with chest pain argued with registration about copays. An elderly woman clutched a plastic bag of medications and asked every passing staff member the same question, eyes panicked. Is this where they save people? At 11 a.m., the first trauma came in. A motorcycle collision. At noon, a construction site fall. At 1, an overdose that required security because the patient woke up swinging. Nora moved through it all, shoulders tight, not from fear, from the effort of holding her body together. Pain lived in her left hip like a cold animal that never slept. Some days it curled up and let her work. Some days it woke hungry and bit. Today it bit. Maya tried to shadow her, hovering with supplies, offering to lift. Nora refused without looking up, not out of pride, out of habit. At 1:45, Slate appeared at the desk like a man checking the time for a meeting he had scheduled for someone else's misery. Caldwell, he said, you're up. Nora washed her hands, dried them, and walked toward the physical therapy wing without looking back. The corridor to PT was quieter than the ER, the air warmer, the lighting softer. It almost felt like a different building, a place where pain was acknowledged instead of hidden. A woman in a blazer stood by the gym doors holding a clipboard. She had the kind of hair that never frizzed, the kind of smile that came with corporate training. Miss Caldwell, she said. Denise Carver, Human Resources. Nora nodded. Ma'am. Denise glanced down at Nora's shoes, then up again quickly as if she had not. Thank you for coming, she said. This evaluation is simply to ensure you can perform essential duties safely. Slate stepped out from inside the gym, already wearing his irritation like a badge. She's here, he said. Let's get it done. The PT gym smelled like rubber mats and cleaning solution. In the center of the room, a stack of boxes sat beside a wheeled stretcher. A CPR mannequin lay on a table like a quiet accusation. Cones marked a short obstacle course. Nora stood still, eyes taking it in the way she took in a trauma bay. Fast. Complete. No wasted motion. Denise began reading from the clipboard. Task 1. Lift and carry a 50-pound box from point A to point B. Repeat 3 times. Slate held his tablet. Whenever you're ready. Nora bent her knees slowly. Her left leg resisted. The brace creaked faintly under fabric. She gripped the box, tightened her core, and lifted. Pain flared up her hip like electricity. Her vision blurred at the edges, then cleared. She did not grunt. She did not breathe loud. She took one step, then another. Thud, drag, thud, drag. Slate watched her like a predator watches an animal limp. Denise watched with polite discomfort, eyes flicking away when Nora's face tightened. Nora reached the marked line and set the box down with control. No drop, no wobble. She returned for the second, then the third. By the end, sweat dampened the collar of her scrubs. Her pulse throbbed in her left ankle as if the pain had traveled down and decided to settle there. Denise cleared her throat. Task 2. Patient transfer simulation. Move the stretcher from bay marker to hallway marker and back. Maintain control at all times. Nora gripped the stretcher rails. The wheels squeaked. She pushed. Her body leaned into it, weight shifted forward to spare her hip. It was not graceful. It was functional. Halfway through, her left leg caught slightly on the rubber mat. Her hands tightened. Her breath hitched for a fraction. Then she corrected smooth again. Slate tapped something on his screen. Noted, he murmured. Nora heard him. She did not respond. Her job was not to win his approval. Her job was to finish. Denise moved to the next line. Task 3. CPR compressions. Maintain proper depth and rate for 10 minutes without stopping. Slate's eyes lit just slightly as if this was the moment he had been waiting for. Nora stepped up to the mannequin. She placed her hands. Stacked, locked, centered. She began. 1, 2, 3. The rhythm settled into her shoulders, into her arms, into the bones of her hands. 100 compressions per minute, steady, relentless. The sound of the mannequin's chest mechanism clicking became a metronome. Slate watched the clock. The first minute passed, then the second. Nora's breathing deepened, controlled like she was managing oxygen the way she managed everything else. Her arms did not shake. Her hands did not slip. But behind her eyes, something began to shift. The gym's fluorescent lighting faded slightly, and another light pushed through. Harsh and white and unforgiving. Heat pressed against her skin. Dust coated her tongue. The clicking under her palms became something else. Something older. A different sound, a different rhythm. She smelled copper. Not from a cut in a hospital, but from blood that had hit dirt and soaked in. Her breath stayed steady, but her mind moved. A voice crackled in her head, distorted by static. Medic, we need a medic. The gym floor under her knees became rough ground. Grit bit into her skin through fabric. Her ears filled with the sharp snap of rounds passing overhead. Not the clean beep of a monitor. Not the soft shuffle of hospital shoes. Something faster, meaner. A man's scream cut through. Nora's hands kept working. Her shoulders kept moving. Her mouth stayed closed, but inside her jaw was clenched around a memory that did not ask permission to return. She saw it without wanting to. A sun-bleached valley, jagged hills, a wall of mud brick half collapsed, smoke crawling upward. Someone shouted a call sign. Someone yelled for a tourniquet, and then the whistle that meant you had seconds. If you were lucky. Slate's voice cut in faint, distant. Stay awake, Caldwell. Nora did not hear him. She heard a different voice, louder, raw, with command. Stay with me. Her own voice from years ago. She remembered her hands, the same hands moving over a thigh wound that pumped blood like a broken pipe. She remembered shoving gauze into a hole that wanted to swallow it. She remembered her fingers slick her grip iron. She remembered a man's eyes, pale under dust, staring at her, like she was the last thing tethering him to the world. Her shoulders burned now. Real burn. Present burn. The kind that came when muscles began to fail. Denise shifted uncomfortably. Her form looks good, she said, trying to sound professional. Slate's mouth tightened. Let's see if she lasts. The 7th minute hit and pain moved in heavy deep, spreading from Nora's hip up her spine. Her left leg trembled not from weakness, from the nerve fire that never truly left. Her vision fuzzed at the edges again, but her hands did not slow. Her rhythm stayed perfect. The clicking sound under her palms became the thump of rotor blades in her mind. The ground shook. Someone yelled about incoming. She saw herself running, med bag slamming against her side, crossing open ground that was too open. Dirt kicked up around her boots. She remembered thinking nothing at all because thinking would have made her stop. She remembered sliding into a crater beside two men in tan and green, both bleeding, both furious, both alive, only because anger sometimes kept people standing when blood wanted them down. She remembered the captain's face, hard, young, eyes like steel. She remembered him snarling, "Who the hell are you?" She remembered answering without hesitation, "I'm your best chance." In the gym, Nora's breath hitched. It was not a sob, it was the moment pain tried to pull her out of the present. She forced air back into her lungs and kept compressing. Slate glanced at Denise. "She's struggling." Denise looked down at her clipboard, then back up, avoiding Nora's face. "She's maintaining rate and depth." Slate's lips pressed into a thin line. He wanted a visible failure. He wanted a reason that would look clean on paper. 10 minutes. The timer beeped. Nora stopped and sat back on her heels. Her chest rose and fell hard now, sweat dripping from her nose to the mat. Her arms felt heavy but not unsteady. Her left hip throbbed with such intensity it made her teeth ache. Slate stepped closer, tablet in hand, voice cool. Time. Nora pushed herself to stand. She used the table edge for a fraction, then released it. She stood upright, spine straight, despite the fused stiffness that lived there. Denise cleared her throat voice, hesitant. "You completed all tasks within acceptable parameters." Nora looked at Slate, "Then I pass." Slate's eyes narrowed. "Technically, he said you met baseline requirements." Baseline. The word landed like dirt in her mouth. But Slate continued, "I observed significant hesitation during the carry task and visible respiratory strain during compressions." Nora's voice stayed even. "I completed them." Slate leaned in, slightly lowering his voice as if offering advice. "Look at yourself," he said. "You're breaking down in real time. It's not just unsafe, it's unpleasant. Patients see it, staff feels it. You drag the whole department down." Denise shifted, uncomfortable. "Dr. Slate." She began the evaluation as pass or fail. She passed. Slate didn't look at her. "I'm not firing her today," he said, calm. "I'm documenting risk." He turned the tablet so Denise could see. Probationary status. Increased supervision. Any deviation from performance standards triggers removal from trauma assignment. Denise's lips parted. She looked like she wanted to say no and could not find the spine to do it in front of him. Nora's gaze stayed on Slate. "So this was never about the test," she said. Slate's smile returned faint and cold. "It's about reality," he replied. Nora's eyes sharpened. "Reality is, you wanted me exhausted," she said. "So my body would betray me." Slate's nostrils flared. The mask cracked for a second. He stepped closer, voice dropping so Denise would not hear. "I'm going to get you out of my ER," he said. "One way or another." Nora did not step back. Her voice stayed low. "You're wasting your time." Slate's mouth twisted. "You're a relic," he whispered. "A broken thing they keep around out of guilt. Go home, Nora. Go sit somewhere quiet and let people who can move do the work." Something in Nora's eyes went still. Not angry. Worse, clear. She turned away from him without a word, limped towards the door, and pushed it open with a steady hand. The hallway outside felt colder than it had before. The softness of PT lighting faded. The harsh ER fluorescence greeted her like interrogation lamps. The sounds hit her all at once, louder than before. Monitors, voices, a child crying, a gurney rolling fast. Maya stood near the trauma desk, waiting, face tight with worry she tried to hide. When she saw Nora, she stepped forward. "How did it go?" Maya asked. Nora's breath was still heavy, but her voice was calm. "I did what they asked." Maya searched her face, and Nora's fingers brushed her pocket, feeling the folded letter, the coin chain, the edge of something sharp and official. "And I'm still here," Nora said. Maya's eyes flicked down to Nora's leg, to the tremor that had not fully stopped. "You shouldn't have had to prove anything." Nora looked past her toward Trauma 1 where the curtains were drawn, and staff moved in and out like ghosts. They didn't want proof, Nora said softly. They wanted permission. A stretcher rattled past wheels, squeaking the patient moaning into an oxygen mask. A nurse called for an IV pump. Someone shouted for security. The waiting room noise swelled. Nora stepped back into the flow, her limp pulling at her. Her hands already reaching for the next task because work was the only thing that made the pain useful. At the far end of the central desk, the red secure phone sat in its cradle covered in a thin layer of dust no one bothered to wipe. Nora's eyes flicked to it for a brief moment, then away, as if looking at it too long would invite something she could not afford to handle. She inhaled once, steadying her breath, and walked toward the next bay, as the rain kept hammering the roof above Harborview, relentless and patient, like it had all the time in the world. By the time Monday came, the red phone still sat in its cradle like a thing forgotten on purpose. People walked past it without seeing it. They glanced at it the way they glanced at fire extinguishers and exit signs, as if acknowledging it might invite the kind of day it was built for. Nora kept moving. Slate kept watching. He did not need to raise his voice anymore. After the evaluation, the paperwork did that for him. Probationary status, increased supervision, performance monitoring. The language followed her through the department like a shadow that never quite matched her shape. He started small. He always did. The worst rooms, the most combative patients, the families that wanted someone to blame, the charts that were already a mess before she touched them. Slate assigned her to a string of shifts that bent the body and broke the sleep. When she walked into the locker room at the start of each day, the schedule felt like a dare. Nora did not complain. She adjusted her brace in the dark. She swallowed her pain meds with lukewarm water. She tied her hair back tight and stepped into the noise. In Trauma 2, she held pressure on a scalp laceration that would not stop bleeding her fingers slick with warm blood. Her voice calm as she counted breaths for a man who kept trying to sit up. In Bay 7, she de-escalated a withdrawal patient who called her names that bounced off her like gravel off a wall. She did not flinch when he spit. She did not step back when he shouted. She held her ground steady, close enough to help and far enough to live through it. Maya followed her whenever she could. Not always at her side because Slate noticed patterns, but close enough to catch a falling tray, close enough to lift a shoulder under a heavy patient when Nora's leg trembled. One night, when the ER quieted just enough to hear the building breathe, Maya leaned close and whispered, "Why do you stay in a place that wants you gone?" Nora kept her eyes on the triage board, scanning names and colors and times. Because the day the room turns into a storm, Nora said, you do not want the person who looks best. You want the person who does not panic. Maya stared at her. And you don't. Nora's mouth tightened. I learned not to. Slate's voice cut across the station sharp and bright. Caldwell. Nora did not jump. She turned. Slate stood with his tablet eyes, cool face made for confidence. I need you to redo that line, he said, pointing at a dressing she had applied 5 minutes earlier. Nora glanced once. The dressing was clean. The wound was covered. There was no bleeding through. It's fine, Nora said. Slate's smile thinned. I want it redone. Maya's hands curled into fists under the desk. Nora did not argue. She lifted the supplies and walked back into the room. She heard Slate behind her speaking to an intern as if Nora were a lesson. That is what standards look like, Slate said. You cannot let personal pride interfere with patient safety. Nora's jaw locked. She redid the dressing with the same precision she used for everything. When she finished the patient, a middle-aged man with a torn forearm watched her with tired eyes. You didn't do it wrong the first time, he said. Nora cleaned her hands. No, she replied. Then why you doing it again? Nora looked at him for a beat, measuring what he could carry. Because some people need to see power, she said quietly, even when it does not help. She left the room limp-heavy and returned to the station without looking at Slate. 3 days after the evaluation, Bayport woke up under rain so hard it looked like the sky was trying to scrub the city clean. cars hissed through standing water. The river had risen by noon. The news screens in the waiting room ran a traffic alert banner that nobody read until it mattered. Harborview's ambulance bay doors kept opening and shutting like lungs. The air smelled like wet concrete and bleach. The waiting room filled with damp coats and impatience with people who had been holding their pain all day and could not hold it anymore. At 4:17, the charge nurse's voice cracked over the intercom. Code black. A beat of silence, then movement like a switch flipped. Multiple casualties. Highway pileup on Route 64. Bus rollover. ETA 5 minutes. The words hit the ER like a physical force. Staff stopped doing what they were doing and started doing what they were trained for. Curtains snapped open. Beds rolled into place. Oxygen tanks clanked. Trays slammed onto counters. Someone shouted for more IV pumps. Someone else called blood bank. Slate stepped out of an office with a calm that felt rehearsed. He raised his voice just enough for the department to hear. All hands. Trauma protocol. Clear bays 1 through 4. Let's move. Maya's eyes met Nora's across the station. Maya was already grabbing supplies, fingers moving fast. Nora was already walking limp, pronounced as she pushed a gurney into position. Thud, drag, thud, drag. Nora did not look like speed. She looked like inevitability. They had the first trauma bay almost ready when the red phone rang. It was not a ringtone. It was a hard mechanical buzz that sounded like something from another era. People froze for a half second because they forgot it could make noise. Slate glanced at it, then reached for it like a man picking up a crown. He lifted the receiver. Dr. Slate. He listened. Color drained from his face in real time. The room around him kept moving, but Slate stood still, eyes fixed on something only he could see. "Yes, sir," he said. He swallowed. Understood. He lowered the receiver with care as if it might explode if he dropped it. He stared at the phone for a beat longer than necessary, then turned to the department. "Change of plan," he shouted. The charge nurse's head snapped up. "What?" Slate's voice tightened. "We have a federal VIP incoming by helicopter. Immediate arrival. Trauma 1 and 2 are now secured." The charge nurse stared at him as if he had spoken a different language. "We have a bus rollover in 5 minutes." Slate's jaw flexed. "Divert." "We cannot divert that," Nora said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut clean through the noise. People turned without meaning to. Slate's eyes landed on her. "We can, and we will. This is a federal directive." Nora took a step closer. "We have capacity." Slate's lips curled. "You do not get to decide capacity." Maya looked between them, heart-thudding hands full of gauze. The charge nurse's eyes narrowed. "Who is it?" she demanded. Slate did not answer the question. He raised his voice instead. "Seattle General is taking the mass casualty. We are locked down." Nora felt something cold slide into her chest. Locked down. Red phone. Helicopter. The words carried a weight that did not belong in a civilian ER. The roof began to tremble. At first, it was subtle, like a distant truck. Then it grew heavier, rhythmic pounding through the building. Rotor blades. Not news helicopter light. Not Coast Guard rescue either. This was deeper, heavier, the kind of sound that came with men who did not ask permission. Whump, whump, whump. Dust sifted down from the ceiling tiles. The ambulance bay doors slid open with a hiss. The first thing through was not a stretcher. It was armed men. 4 operators in dark tactical gear moved in rifles, held tight eyes, scanning every corner as if the hospital itself might be hostile. They moved with a discipline that made everyone else's motions look sloppy. Security at Harborview. A young officer named Trent stood near the metal detector. He took one look at the rifles and decided to stare at his shoes with intense focus. Behind the operators came the stretcher. The patient on it was not in uniform. He was older suit jacket, open shirt, soaked with sweat. An oxygen mask pressed to his face. His skin had the gray tint of a body that was losing a fight. 2 medics moved with the stretcher, and with them came another cluster of men who looked like they had been carved from something harder than muscle. Thick beards, heavy forearms, eyes that never stopped moving. SEALS. Nora recognized the way they held themselves, the way their silence felt like a warning. She recognized the look in their eyes, that tight focus that lived one step away from violence. Slate stepped forward like he was greeting a camera. "I'm Dr. Cameron Slate, Chief Resident," he said, voice bright. "I'll be taking lead." A bearded SEAL with a scar across his cheek did not even glance at him. "Clear a secure room," he barked. Slate bristled. "This is my department." The SEAL's eyes flicked to Slate for the first time, flat and unimpressed. "Move." The stretcher rolled into Trauma 1. The operators fanned out, creating a perimeter. The room tightened. Nurses moved carefully, suddenly aware of the rifles and the fear beneath them. Maya stood at the edge of the bay, hands trembling slightly as she reached for a bag valve mask. She glanced at Nora. Nora was at the doorway, not inside yet, reading the room the way she read vitals. Slate moved to the head of the bed. "Give me a report." A medic rattled off numbers. Found him collapsed in a vehicle during transfer. Chest pain reported earlier. Possible seizure. He fell, now hypotensive. Tachycardic. O2 sats dropping. Slate nodded too fast. "Myocardial infarction," he said with certainty that felt like armor. "Prep for intubation. Call cath lab. Start a heparin drip." The bearded SEAL leaned in. "He is a senator," he snapped. "He cannot die here." Slate's eyes widened. "Senator?" That word changed the air, made it heavier. Slate lifted the laryngoscope. His hands were steady for a second, then they were not. He adjusted his grip jaw tight. The patient thrashed weakly, fighting the oxygen mask, eyes wild. "Sedate him," Slate snapped. "Etomidate, now." A nurse hesitated. "His pressure is 70/40. Slate's voice rose. "Then push epi, we need the airway." Nora stepped into the bay. "No," she said. Slate whipped his head toward her like she had slapped him. "Get out." Nora did not stop moving. She moved to the side of the bed, eyes on the patient's neck, on the way the skin pulled with each breath. "Look at his jugular," Nora said. "They are distended." Slate glared at her. "It is a heart attack." Nora's voice stayed calm. "His trachea is shifted." The room hesitated. Even the bearded SEAL paused, eyes flicking to the patient's throat as if seeing it for the first time. Slate's mouth opened, then shut. He looked at the monitor. He looked at the patient. He looked back at Nora. Nora leaned in slightly, speaking with the certainty of someone who had watched the same scene play out with worse lighting and louder consequences. "This is tension pneumothorax," she said. "If you sedate and intubate before decompression, the pressure will stop his heart." Slate's eyes flashed with anger. "You are a nurse." Nora's gaze did not flinch. "And he is dying." The monitor beeped faster, then slower. The blood pressure number dropped again. A nurse at the monitor cried out, voice breaking. 58/32. The senator's skin turned a deeper shade of gray. His lips took on a blue edge. Slate's throat worked. He tightened his grip on the laryngoscope. He looked like a man trying to force his body to do what his mind could not decide. The bearded SEAL shifted his rifle, not aiming, but enough to change the room. "Fix him," the SEAL growled. Slate swallowed. His eyes flicked from the rifle to the patient. His hand stopped. He froze. The laryngoscope dipped. His shoulders sagged as if gravity had increased. For a heartbeat, the entire bay held still, caught between authority and terror. Nora did not wait. She moved like her limp was not a limitation but a detail. She lunged toward the crash cart, fingers ripping open drawers. Her hands found what she needed without searching. An angiocath needle, 14 gauge. She turned back to the bed. The bearded SEAL stepped in front of her rifle, rising instinctively. "Back off," he snarled. "Get away from him." Nora did not look at the weapon. She looked straight into the SEAL's eyes. Her voice changed. The softness vanished. The politeness vanished. In its place was something sharp, commanding, familiar in a way that made the SEAL hesitate without understanding why. "He has a collapsed lung," she said. 10 seconds. The SEAL's jaw clenched. "Who the hell are you?" Nora held his gaze. The only person in this room not panicking. The senator's chest rose with a useless gasp. The monitor tone warped into something long and thin. Slate's face went blank with fear. Nora stepped forward. The SEAL's rifle barrel hovered, then lowered a fraction. "Do it," the SEAL growled. Nora did not ask for gloves. She did not ask for permission. She placed 2 fingers on the senator's chest, measuring space by touch, by instinct, by a memory that lived in her muscles. Slate found his voice thin and outraged. "You cannot just stab a patient." Nora's eyes stayed on the senator. "You can watch him die," she said quietly, "or you can move." Slate did not move. Nora drove her shoulder into him, not hard enough to injure, hard enough to displace. Slate stumbled back a step, shocked. Nora leaned in. The needle went in. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then a sharp hiss burst out loud in the silence like air escaping a tire. The sound cut through the room and something shifted. The senator's chest expanded. His body shuddered as if the pressure inside him had been unclamped. The monitor tone stuttered, then returned to beeps. The number on the blood pressure screen climbed. A nurse at the monitor gasped. 85/50. Maya snapped out of her freeze and moved on instinct, bagging the senator with the mask hands squeezing in a steady rhythm. Color crept back into the senator's face. His lips lost their blue edge. His eyes fluttered less frantic. Nora secured the needle with tape hands, moving fast and precise. She checked pupils. She checked pulse. She listened to breath sounds, jaw tight. Her left leg trembled violently now. Adrenaline drained, leaving raw pain behind. She gripped the bedrail for a second to keep her weight steady. The room did not speak. The bearded SEAL stared at Nora like she had transformed in front of him. His eyes flicked to her braceline under the scrubs, then back to her face. "Clear," Nora said. Her voice was back to normal, raspier, quieter. "He is stable enough for transport." Slate blinked. The color returned to his face, and with it returned something uglier, that familiar need to own the moment. He straightened his coat, cleared his throat. "Good catch," Slate said. No one responded. Slate continued anyway. "I was about to order decompression." Nurse Caldwell anticipated my command. Nora did not look at him. Slate turned to the operator's posture stiff. "Gentlemen, the patient is stabilized. We will move him to cath lab." The bearded SEAL ignored Slate. He stepped closer to Nora instead. "What is your name?" he asked, voice low. "Nora," she said. He studied her. "Where did you learn to do that?" Nora's fingers tightened on the rail. "Experience. That was not nursing school," he said. "That was field." Nora's gaze sharpened for a half-second, then smoothed. "You learn things when you work long enough." Slate stepped between them like a jealous child. "Nurse Caldwell has been with the hospital a long time," he said, voice overly pleasant. "She is rough around the edges. I apologize for her lack of protocol." The SEAL looked at Slate with open contempt. "Protocol," he repeated. Slate lifted his chin. "She performed a physician-level procedure without direct authorization. That is a liability. I will be documenting it." The SEAL's mouth curled, not into a smile. "She saved the senator while you stood there," he said. "Document that." Slate's face flushed deep red. "I am the chief resident." The SEAL tapped his earpiece, ignoring him. "Package stable. Moving." The senator's stretcher rolled out of the bay, operators surrounding it, rifles angled down, but ready. As the group passed Nora, the bearded SEAL paused. "Thanks," he said simply. Then he was gone, leaving behind a bay that felt too quiet for what had just happened. Slate turned slowly to face Nora. The anger on his face looked personal, intimate, like a bruise. "You think you are a hero," he hissed, stepping close enough that only she could hear. "You embarrassed me in front of federal security." Nora's voice was steady. "I saved him." "You endangered him," Slate whispered. "You acted like a cowboy. You laid hands on a VIP. You shoved me. You practiced medicine without a license." Nora's eyes did not blink. "You froze." Slate's mouth twisted. "And you will pay for humiliating me." He straightened, raising his voice again for the room. "Nurse Caldwell is relieved of duty," he announced, "effective immediately." Maya's head snapped up. What? Slate cut her off with a glare. She violated protocol in a high-risk situation. She physically interfered with physician care. Nora stared at him, the words landing with a cold clarity. "You are lying," she said, not loud. Slate's eyes flashed. "I am protecting this hospital." Denise Carver from HR appeared in the doorway, drawn by commotions, eyes wide. "Dr. Slate, what is going on?" Slate turned to her, voice smooth again, a man putting on a suit. "We had an incident," he said. Caldwell became unstable. "She performed an invasive procedure without authorization. Liability risk. We cannot allow it." Denise's gaze flicked to Nora, then to the staff, then back to Slate. "But the patient," Slate's voice sharpened, "the patient is stabilized. The issue now is compliance." Nora felt the room watching her staff, who had avoided Slate's wrath, suddenly silent, because silence was the only shield they knew. Maya took a step forward, trembling. "She saved him," she said. Slate's eyes cut to Maya. "Do you want to join her?" Maya froze. Nora looked at Maya once. Her eyes softened barely. "Stop," Nora said quietly. Maya's lips pressed together. Her eyes filled, but she did not speak again. Slate leaned closer to Nora, voice low. "Get out of my ER," he said. "Do not come back until you hear from the board." Nora stood still for a beat, the pain in her hip pulsing, the hiss of that decompression still echoing in her ears. She looked past Slate to the bays, to the monitors, to the patients, to the nurses moving with practiced exhaustion. 15 years in this building. Thousands of small decisions. Hundreds of lives that had brushed against her hands and kept going. "You are making a mistake," Nora said. Slate's smile was thin and cruel. "The only mistake was keeping you here this long." Nora did not raise her voice. She did not argue. That was the strange dignity of her. She simply turned and walked toward the locker room. Thud, drag, thud, drag. Every step felt heavier now, not because her leg had changed, but because the building felt different. The lights harsher, the air colder, the sound of her limp louder, as if the walls wanted to remember it. In the locker room, she shut the door and leaned against it for a second, breath catching. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her scrub-top ties. She changed slowly. Street clothes, a sweater, jeans that did not touch the brace. Her fingers found the coin on its chain in her pocket. She held it for a moment, thumb rubbing the worn edge. Then she slipped it back under her shirt and let it rest against her skin. When she stepped outside, the rain hit her like a slap. Bayport's sky was low and gray. Water ran down the sidewalk in little rivers. Cars hissed past, throwing spray onto the curb. Nora walked to the bus stop with her head down, limp heavy each step, sending a dull ache up her spine. She sat on the metal bench, coat already soaking through, hands folded in her lap. Across the street, the hospital's windows glowed warm and bright. Inside, people kept working. Inside, lives kept arriving. Nora stared at the puddle at her feet, watching raindrops break the surface and vanish. For the first time all day, the tightness in her chest loosened enough for a single tear to slip free. It mixed with the rain before it could fall. She wiped it away quickly, almost irritated at herself, and pressed her palm against the metal bench as if it could anchor her. The bus route sign rattled in the wind. Behind her, Harborview's ambulance bay doors opened again, spilling light into the storm. Up on the 4th floor, the air smelled different. Less bleach, more plastic. Less noise, more control. The hall outside critical care had been cleared so thoroughly it felt staged, like a corridor waiting for a camera crew. 2 men in suits stood near the elevators with earpieces and hands clasped in front of them. Farther down, operators in plain, dark clothes leaned against the wall with the kind of stillness that came from training, not boredom. Inside the room, the senator lay propped on pillows, oxygen running, heart monitor steady. His face was still gray around the edges, but the immediate danger had backed off. A cardiology fellow murmured to an attending, while a nurse checked lines with practiced calm. The senator's suit jacket had been cut off hours ago and tossed in a biohazard bag like it was nothing. Power did not mean much when a body decided to fail. At the window, Captain Jack Rowe stood with his hands behind his back, staring out at the rain. Dress khakis clung to his shoulders where the fabric had absorbed moisture from the air. His posture was rigid without looking forced, the kind of rigid that stuck even when nobody was watching. Chief Petty Officer Grant Voss stepped into the room quietly and stopped 2 paces behind him. "Senator is stable," Voss said. "Cath team got the stent placed. Pressure is holding." Rowe nodded, once eyes still on the streaks of water crawling down the glass. "And the lung," Rowe asked. Voss hesitated just enough to tell the truth before he spoke it. "Close." Rowe finally turned. His eyes were a pale gray that did not warm easily. "Explain," he said. Voss shifted his weight, then went still again. Doc Slate in the ER thought it was just cardiac. He was moving toward intubation. Rowe's jaw tightened, and Voss's mouth pulled into a thin line. He froze. That word sat heavy in the room, heavier than the monitor beeps. Rowe's gaze stayed on Voss. "Say it again." Voss didn't blink. "He froze, sir." Rowe's eyes flicked once sharp. "So why is the senator breathing right now?" Voss exhaled through his nose. A nurse stepped in. Older woman, limping bad. She drove a 14 gauge into his chest like she'd been waiting her whole life for someone to get out of the way. Rowe went very still. "A nurse," he repeated. "Yes, sir." "Name." Voss swallowed. "I heard it in the bay. Nora. Last name, Caldwell." Rowe's face did not change, but something in his eyes shifted as if a door cracked open to a room he kept locked. "Nora Caldwell," he said again slower. Voss nodded. Slate tried to paint it like she went rogue. Afterward, he threatened to write her up. I heard him say she practiced without a license. Rowe's stare sharpened, threatened. Voss's voice hardened. "Then he did more than threaten, sir. He fired her." Rowe's eyes narrowed. "He fired her." "Yes, sir." Rowe turned back to the window. His right hand flexed once subtle, like a muscle remembering something. His shoulder, the one that always carried a slight stiffness, shifted under the fabric of his uniform. Voss waited. He had seen Rowe in gunfights. He had seen Rowe walk into rooms where men stopped breathing just because Rowe showed up. This was different. This wasn't tactical. This was personal, and that made it dangerous in a way bullets could not. Rowe spoke without turning. "The limp," he said, "left side." Voss nodded. "Left leg drags. Bad enough you can hear it." But when the room turned hot, she moved like she didn't even feel it. Rowe's throat worked once. He kept his voice level. "Describe her." Voss pictured her face, the wet hair stuck to her forehead when she stood there holding the bed rail, sweat and pain on her skin, and still no fear in her eyes. "Late 50s, Voss said. Gray hair, raspy voice, eyes like ice." And she looked at my rifle like it was furniture. Rowe closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. 14 years, tried to rise up from the bottom of his memory. Dust. Heat. A crater that smelled like smoke and blood. A woman's voice cutting through mortar blasts with a command that made men obey without thinking. "Stay with me." Rowe opened his eyes, and the gray in them looked darker. "Where is she now?" he asked. Voss's jaw tightened. I asked around. The nurse at the desk said she left, walked out. Bus stop on Atlantic. Rowe turned fully then. The ribbons on his chest caught the fluorescent light. His expression was calm, but there was a current underneath it that made the air feel thin. "Stay with the senator," Rowe said. Voss nodded. "You want a detail?" Rowe's voice dropped quiet and absolute. "No." Voss hesitated. "Sir." Rowe held his gaze. "I am not going to war. I am going to speak to a doctor." Voss's eyes narrowed, understood. Rowe adjusted his jacket once the motion precise, then walked out. The men in suits by the elevator straightened. An operator stepped off the wall. Rowe did not slow. "Stay here," he said, and the operator stayed because Rowe's tone left no space for discussion. The elevator ride down was silent. The hum of the cables felt too loud. Rowe stared at the numbers changing, jaw tight, a muscle ticking once in his cheek. When the doors opened on the ER floor, the noise hit hard. The smell returned. Wet coats, bleach, old coffee, the metal bite of blood that had been cleaned but not forgotten. Slate was at the central station, exactly where he liked to be when he wanted witnesses. He stood with 2 interns and an administrator in a blazer that looked more expensive than the man wearing it could afford. Slate's white coat was clean, as if he had not just nearly watched a senator die. He was speaking in a tone that sounded concerned. It was a rogue action, Slate said. Nurse Caldwell has been deteriorating. Mentally. It's tragic, but it happens. She physically shoved me to get to the patient. Then, she performed an invasive procedure without authorization. It was luck she didn't puncture the heart. The administrator nodded too fast. We can't have that. Lawsuits, media, federal scrutiny. Exactly, Slate said. I made the call to terminate for patient safety. I will not allow sentiment to put this hospital at risk. The interns watched with admiration, hungry for the kind of confidence that could bend rooms. A voice cut through the air rough and low. Excuse me. Slate turned a smile already forming, ready to greet whoever needed to be handled. Then his smile died. Captain Jack Rowe stood in front of the desk, tall, still dressed in navy khakis, with a rank that did not belong in this space. His presence did not require volume. It filled the station the way a storm filled the horizon. Slate blinked once, recalculating. Captain Slate said quickly, posture stiffening. Good to see you. The senator is stable. My team's measures were effective. Rowe's eyes held Slate's face like a clamp. Your team, Rowe repeated. Slate nodded. Yes, I took charge in the bay and ensured stabilization. There was a complication, but we managed it. Rowe took 1 step closer. The interns leaned back without meaning to. My operator tells me you froze, Rowe said. Slate let out a small laugh that sounded wrong. High-stress situations can produce unreliable perceptions. Rowe didn't blink. He tells me a nurse saved the senator. Slate's throat tightened. Nurse Caldwell interfered. She violated protocol. Rowe's voice stayed level. You fired her. Slate lifted his chin. Yes. For patient safety. Rowe's gaze didn't move. Why? Slate exhaled as if explaining something obvious to someone slow. She is physically unfit for acute trauma. Permanent injury. Slow response. Frankly, it is embarrassing for the department. Rowe's eyes narrowed a fraction. What kind of injury? Slate shrugged. Hip, leg, arthritis maybe. She walks like a turtle. The administrator looked uncomfortable now, sensing the temperature shift. Rowe went very still. Left side, Rowe said not a question. Slate blinked. Yes, left. Rowe stared at him for a beat longer than comfort could tolerate. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Slate's eyes flicked to it, confused. Rowe tapped the screen once and lifted it. An old photo filled the display. Grainy. Sun bleached. Men in dusty gear standing in front of jagged mountains. Faces half hidden behind beards and sunglasses. A unit shot from a different world. In the middle, slightly off-center, stood a woman in a helmet with dirt on her face, smiling despite exhaustion. Bright eyes, hard jaw. Young enough to still believe she could outwork pain. Rowe held the phone up so Slate could see it clearly. Describe her, Rowe said. Slate squinted, thrown. I don't understand why a photo matters. Rowe's eyes did not soften. Describe her. Slate swallowed. Gray hair now. Late 50s. Raspy voice. Limp. Rowe turned his head slightly and scanned the gathered staff eyes, landing on Maya Rhodes, who stood near the desk with her hands clenched around a stack of chart papers like they were the only thing holding her together. Rowe pointed once. You, Maya, startled. Yes, sir. What is her full name, Rowe asked. Maya's mouth opened. Her voice came out small. Nora Caldwell. Rowe closed his eyes for a fraction. When he opened them, the air around him felt sharper. Where is she? He asked. Maya's eyes darted to Slate, then back to Rowe. Bus stop, she said. Atlantic Avenue. She left maybe 20 minutes ago. Slate stepped in fast, trying to regain control. Captain, with respect, she is no longer employed here. This is an internal staffing issue. The senator's care is the priority. Rowe looked at Slate as if looking through him. You fired Nora Caldwell, Rowe, said voice rising just enough to carry not enough to shout. You called her a liability. Slate's face flushed. She is. Rowe's eyes turned hard. She is the reason I am standing here, Rowe said, and the words hit the ER like a weight. The interns froze. The administrator's mouth parted. Rowe's voice grew stronger, filling the station. That woman is a retired Navy nurse officer. The limp you mocked is not from a fall in a grocery store. Slate's confidence wavered. I didn't know. It's not in her file. Rowe's jaw tightened. It isn't in her file because she didn't need it to be. Slate's mouth opened, searching for a defense. Rowe stepped closer. The distance between them shrank until Slate had to tilt his head up. You froze, Rowe said quietly. She acted. Slate's face turned redder. I was assessing. It was a complex presentation. Rowe's eyes flicked to the interns. You saw it, he said. No one spoke. Fear and habit held them like chains. Rowe turned back to Maya. You saw it, he said again, softer, not threatening. Did she save him? Maya's throat moved. Her eyes shone with tears she was fighting not to show. Yes, she said, she did. Slate snapped. Maya, you are a nurse. You do not evaluate physician decisions. Maya flinched. Then something steadied in her. She looked at Slate and her voice came out clearer. I evaluated what I saw, she said. You stopped moving. Slate stared at her, stunned that a subordinate had spoken. Rowe turned back to Slate. Where is the termination paperwork? The administrator cleared his throat. We can discuss this privately. Rowe looked at him. The administrator went silent. Rowe's voice lowered again, deadly calm. You will rescind it. Slate lifted his chin, trying to cling to authority. You cannot dictate hospital staffing. Rowe's expression did not change. I am not dictating, I am correcting. Slate's nostrils flared. This is absurd. I am a physician. I am chief resident. Rowe nodded once, as if acknowledging the words without accepting them. Then he turned away from Slate, already done with the argument. Stay here, Rowe said to no one in particular, and the room obeyed because his voice had become gravity. Rowe walked toward the ambulance bay doors with a long stride that never hurried. Behind him, the ER stayed frozen for a beat, then resumed in small, uncertain motions. Outside, the rain hit like a sheet. The air smelled like wet asphalt and river water. Rowe stepped into it without hesitation. A black SUV waited at the curb, engine running. The driver, an operator in plain clothes, watched the sidewalk and the street with the calm of someone trained to notice everything. Rowe approached and spoke through the cracked window. Atlantic Avenue, Rowe said. The SUV pulled away, tires hissing through water. At the bus stop, Nora sat, hunched, coat soaked through. Her hands were folded in her lap because she did not trust them to do anything else. The metal bench leached cold into her bones. The brace around her leg felt tighter in the damp, as if the weather itself wanted to remind her what was broken. Across the street, Harborview glowed. Warm light behind glass. People moving inside like silhouettes in an aquarium. A bus passed and threw spray onto the curb. Nora did not move. Another car slowed. Tires cut through standing water. The black SUV pulled up with controlled speed and stopped just short of the bus stop sign. Nora's instincts flared. She straightened slightly, fingers tightening on the strap of her purse. Her gaze narrowed, scanning windows, doors, angles. A habit older than Harborview, older than Bayport. The rear door opened. Captain Jack Rowe stepped out into the rain. No umbrella. No hurry. Just a straight walk through water that soaked his uniform and darkened the fabric across his shoulders. Nora stared. Her breath caught sharp, involuntary. For a moment, her brain refused to place the face. Years did that. It blurred edges. It softened lines. Then the eyes hit her, pale and steady, and memory snapped into focus like a rifle sight. Rose stopped 3 feet away. Nora Caldwell, he said. Her voice came out rough. Captain. Rose's jaw worked once. His eyes moved over her face, taking in the gray hair, the lines carved by time, the exhaustion sitting in her posture. Then his gaze dropped to her left leg, to the way it angled, to the way she held herself to keep pain from showing. You walked out, Ro said, voice quiet. Nora swallowed. I was told to. Rose's stare hardened by slate. Nora did not answer. The rain answered for her, hitting the pavement hard enough to sound like applause. Rose stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. I heard what happened, he said. In the bay. Nora's eyes flicked away. It is done. Rose's voice stayed steady. You saved him. Nora's mouth tightened. I did what was necessary. Ro watched her for a beat, then spoke again softer. I remember the dust, he said. Nora's shoulders stiffened. The words pulled her backward without asking. Heat. Noise. Smoke. The taste of metal. Ro continued, voice thickening. I was fading out, losing blood. I remember mortar. I remember you flying back. Nora stared at the street, jaw tight. I thought you were dead, Ro said. Nora's throat moved. She did not speak. Ro took one step closer. But then you crawled back. Nora's eyes closed for a fraction. Her fingers gripped the purse strap harder. Ro's voice lowered. Your leg was destroyed. You were screaming every time you moved. But you dragged me anyway. Nora opened her eyes. Rain ran down her face and made it impossible to tell what was weather and what was not. I was doing my job, she said, voice cracking slightly. Ro shook his head once. That doctor does a job. You served. Nora's gaze snapped to his. Do not do that, she said sharply. Ro stopped, surprised by the edge in her tone. Do not turn it into something. It wasn't. Nora said. It was ugly. It was loud. It was people dying in the dirt. It was me trying not to let more of them die. Ro's eyes softened for the first time. That is exactly what I mean. Nora's breath hitched. She looked down, and her hand slid under her sweater to touch the metal coin at her chest thumb, rubbing the worn edge like a prayer. Ro watched the gesture. He recognized it. Not the object, the need behind it. I looked for you, Ro said. After rehab, after discharge papers. I asked through channels I should not have used. I hit walls, privacy, classified, dead ends. Nora's mouth tightened. You should not have been looking. Ro's voice stayed calm. I have a wife, he said. 2 daughters. Nora's eyes flicked up wary. Ro's expression softened further. Something human breaking through the steel. Their names are Claire and Hannah, he said. They exist because you refused to stop moving. Nora's throat tightened. The sound that tried to rise was not a sob, not quite. More like a breath she had been holding for 14 years, finally finding a crack. I'm not that person anymore, Nora whispered. Ro's gaze held her. You are, he said. Just older, just tired. Still you. Nora shook her head small. I got fired today, she said, in the rain, like I was nothing. Ro's eyes darkened again. He called you a liability. Nora's mouth trembled. He said I was unpleasant to look at. Ro's jaw tightened. He said that. Nora nodded once. Ro turned his head slightly toward the SUV, then back to Nora. His voice lowered, dangerous in its calm. Get in the car, he said. Nora blinked, no. Ro's gaze stayed steady, yes. Nora's hands tightened on the purse strap. I am going home. Ro stepped closer, not threatening, but undeniable. You are not going home like this. Nora's voice rose slightly, frustration and fear mixing. You cannot fix this. He is chief resident. He has the hospital. He has paperwork. Ro's mouth curved into something that was not a smile. He has a title, he said. Nora stared at him. Ro continued, voice quiet. I have a senator upstairs who is awake and breathing because of you, and I have men who do not appreciate lies told in a trauma bay. Nora's breath caught. She looked past Ro to the hospital in the distance. The lights. The movement. The life inside that building she had helped hold together for years. "I cannot face him again," she said almost to herself. Ro's expression softened a fraction. "You do not have to face him alone." Nora's eyes flicked to his soaked uniform, to the rank on his collar, to the calm in his posture that had once existed in a crater full of smoke. Her shoulders sagged slightly. Not defeat, exhaustion. Ro opened the rear door of the SUV. Nora stared at the open doorway as if it were a line she could not cross. Her left leg throbbed. Her hands trembled. The rain kept hitting her face cold and relentless. Ro waited without pushing, giving her the space to make it her choice. Nora inhaled once, steadying herself the way she steadied patience. Then she nodded small. She stood up slowly. Pain shot through her hip and down her leg, and she swallowed it hard. Ro stepped closer, hand hovering near her elbow, ready to catch her if she fell, but not touching without permission. Nora got into the SUV and sat back, breathing hard. Ro closed the door and walked around to the front passenger side. He climbed in, water dripping onto the floor mat, and gave the driver a short nod. The SUV pulled away from the curb, tires slicing through water. Inside the cabin was quiet, except for the wipers scraping rhythmically against the windshield. Nora stared forward, hands clenched in her lap. Ro looked at her once, then out at the road. "You should not have had to fight for that room," he said. Nora's voice was low. "I did not fight," she said. "I worked." Ro's jaw tightened. Slate turned work into war. Nora's eyes closed briefly. "He wanted me to break," she whispered. Ro's voice stayed calm. "He will not get that." The SUV turned onto the hospital road. Harborview rose ahead bright against the storm. The entrance lights reflected off wet pavement. The ambulance bay doors opened and shut as vehicles came and went, as if the building itself were breathing hard. Nora's heart thudded heavier now, not from fear of pain, but from the weight of walking back into a place that had just thrown her out. Ro watched the entrance eyes steady. The SUV slowed near the curb. The automatic doors slid open. And a rush of warm air spilled out, thick with disinfectant and old coffee, and the sour edge of fear that never fully left an emergency department. The fluorescent lights hit Nora like interrogation lamps. Her eyes adjusted fast, but her body did not. The pain in her left hip had settled into a deep pulse, steady as a drumbeat. Thud, drag, thud, drag. Conversation at the central station died the way a candle dies when someone closes a door. Heads turned. A paramedic paused mid-sentence. A nurse froze with a roll of tape in her hand. Even the waiting room seemed to quiet, as if strangers could sense when something important was about to happen and did not want to be caught breathing too loudly. Captain Jack Ro stepped in first, shoulders squared uniform, soaked dark along the seams. Behind him came Grant Voss, and two operators not in full kit now, but still moving with the same controlled awareness. They did not fan out dramatically. They simply existed in the space with a weight that made everyone else unconsciously shift aside. Nora entered, last wet hair stuck to her forehead, street clothes clinging uncomfortably to her brace. She felt exposed without her scrubs. Scrubs were identity. Street clothes made her feel like a person, and people were easier to dismiss. At the center of the station, Dr. Cameron Slate looked up, and the expression on his face flickered through several emotions too quickly to name. He had been smiling a moment ago. He had been performing. Now he looked like a man watching his stage get taken away. Captain Slate called, stepping forward with that polished tone he reserved for donors and cameras. "This is inappropriate. Nurse Caldwell is no longer employed here. She is trespassing." The young security officer, Trent, stood near the entrance with his radio in his hand. He took one look at Ro's posture, at Voss's stare, at the quiet discipline in the operators behind them, and he did not move. Ro did not slow. He walked straight to Slate until they were close enough that Slate had to lean back slightly to keep breathing comfortably. Dr. Ro said, voice calm, carrying without effort. "You told my team you terminated her for incompetence." Slate lifted his chin. "I terminated her for patient safety." Ro's eyes did not blink. You said she was unstable. Slate's jaw tightened. She acted outside scope. Invasive procedure. Unauthorized. She put the patient at risk. Nora felt the room watching her. She felt Maya Rhodes standing near the desk, hands clenched around a stack of charts, eyes bright with something like anger and relief mixed together. She saw Denise Carver from HR lingering at the edge of the crowd, face pale, hands tight around a clipboard, like it could protect her from accountability. Slate's voice rose slightly more confident now that he had an audience. This is a hospital, not a battlefield. We have rules, protocol, chain of command. Rowe's gaze stayed on Slate. You froze, he said. Slate's nostrils flared. That is not accurate. Rowe turned his head and looked across the station at Maya. You were in the room, Rowe said. Did he freeze? Slate snapped, Maya, do not. Maya's throat moved. She swallowed once, then met Rowe's eyes. Yes, she said. Her voice trembled, but it did not break. He froze. A low murmur spread through the staff. Not a roar, not a revolt, just the first sound of people realizing they were not alone in what they saw. Slate's face tightened. You are a nurse, he hissed. You are not qualified to assess physician actions. Maya flinched, then lifted her chin. I am qualified to tell the truth. Slate's eyes cut toward Nora, sharp and punitive. She shoved me, he said, pointing. She interfered with care. Nora's voice came out steady. I moved you, she said, because you were standing between him and air. Slate's cheeks reddened. You laid hands on a senator. Rowe's head turned slowly back to Slate. Do you know what she did to that senator? Rowe asked, tone unchanged. Slate opened his mouth. Rowe continued before he could speak. She gave him his next breath. Slate's lips pressed into a thin line. We are not debating the outcome. We are discussing compliance. Rowe's eyes hardened. You are discussing your ego, he said. The room fell quiet again, tighter than before. Slate's hands curled around his tablet until his knuckles lightened. He looked past Rowe to the administrator, who had been standing nearby, a man in a blazer with an expensive watch and a nervous face. Rowe followed Slate's gaze and spoke to the administrator directly. Name, Rowe said. The man blinked. Elliot Brandt, he stammered. Hospital operations. Rowe nodded once. Mr. Brandt, you signed off on Slate having authority over nursing reviews. Brandt's mouth opened. No sound came out at first. It was a board initiative he managed, modernization, efficiency. Rowe's eyes stayed on Brandt. Did you authorize termination without investigation? Brandt glanced at Slate, then at Denise, then back to Rowe. We have procedures, he said weakly. Rowe's tone did not change, but the room seemed to tighten anyway. You will follow them now. Slate stepped in quickly, voice sharpened. Captain, you are out of line. This is a civilian institution. You cannot walk in here and dictate staffing decisions. Rowe looked at him as if considering whether Slate deserved another sentence. I am not dictating, Rowe said. I am correcting a lie. Slate's eyes flashed. There are legal boundaries. Rowe's mouth moved just enough to suggest something like contempt. Legal boundaries did not keep that senator alive, he said. Competence did. Nora's left leg trembled, and she shifted her weight subtly to hide it. Pain wanted to pull her down now that adrenaline was gone. She fought it the way she fought everything. Quietly. Rowe turned his head slightly and his eyes landed on Nora for the first time since they entered. The crowd did not move. The whole department seemed to hold a collective breath. Rowe stepped away from Slate and faced Nora fully. Nora Caldwell, he said. She swallowed. Captain. Rowe stood very straight. His right hand rose slowly, deliberate, precise. A salute perfect in its angle, perfect in its stillness. Nora felt her chest tighten so fast it almost hurt. She had not seen a salute in years that was meant for her. Not the casual kind in passing, not the half-hearted joking kind. This was formal. This was real. Rowe held it. Lieutenant Nora Caldwell, he said, voice carrying across the ER so that even the waiting room turned toward them. Thank you for my life. Silence pressed down hard. A monitor beeped somewhere. A child coughed, otherwise nothing moved. Then Grant Voss snapped to attention beside Roe. Boots hit the tile with a sharp crack. He saluted too, eyes locked forward. Another operator followed, then another. Nora stared at them, her eyes burning. Maya stepped forward, face wet with tears, unsure of the exact form, but she raised her hand to her brow anyway. One of the older nurses followed, then a paramedic, then a tech, who had been pushing a cart and stopped mid-stride. At the edge of the crowd, Ray Ellis set his mop handle against the wall and stood up straight, shoulders squared in a posture that belonged to a different life. His hand rose in a salute that looked practiced, old, and honest. Nora felt something inside her give way, not dramatically, not loudly. Just a quiet crack like ice breaking under pressure that had been building for years. Her hand rose slowly. It shook. She steadied it, elbow tight to her body, jaw clenched against pain and emotion both. She returned the salute. Roe held his salute for another breath, then lowered his hand. The people who had saluted lowered theirs too, and the department seemed to breathe again. The air felt changed, not soft, not safe, but different, like a door had opened somewhere. Slate stood off to the side, pale now. He looked smaller than he had minutes ago, not because his body changed, but because the room no longer belonged to him. Brandt cleared his throat, voice unsteady. "Captain," he said, "we appreciate your service, but this is still a hospital matter. We have protocols for personnel actions." Roe turned to Brandt. "Your VIP patient is awake," Roe said. "He has been briefed." Brandt's eyes widened. Briefed. Roe nodded once. Senator Malcolm Hargrove does not enjoy hearing that the person who saved him was fired in the rain. A whisper moved through the staff. Senator, name, real weight, real consequence. Brandt's face blanched. The senator spoke about hospital staffing. Roe's gaze remained steady. He spoke about accountability. Slate's voice broke in, desperate to regain ground. "This is manipulation," he snapped. "Political pressure. Donations. This is unethical." Roe looked at Slate with calm disgust. "You used policy as a weapon," he said. "Do not pretend to care about ethics now." Brandt's mouth opened and closed. "We would need documentation," he said. "An investigation. Statements." Roe nodded. "You have witnesses." Brandt's eyes flicked around the crowd. Faces that had avoided Slate for months now looked back at Brandt with a new steadiness, as if something in them had been granted permission to exist. Maya spoke first, voice stronger now. "I will give a statement." The older nurse stepped forward. "I will too." A paramedic raised his hand. "I was there." Denise Carver swallowed hard. Her clipboard trembled slightly. "I can confirm the evaluation was passed," she said quietly. Her eyes did not meet Slate's. Slate snapped his head toward Denise. "That is irrelevant." Denise's lips pressed together. "It is not." Brandt looked like a man drowning in numbers that suddenly included reputations, donors, federal attention lawsuits, staff turnover, and something else he did not like calculating. Human loyalty. Roe's voice stayed even. "Rescind her termination," he said. Slate stepped forward, voice sharp. "You cannot." Brandt glanced at Slate, then at the crowd, then at Nora, standing there with her hand still trembling slightly at her side. Brandt inhaled. "Dr. Slate," he said, voice flattening. "Step back." Slate blinked. "Excuse me." Brandt's tone hardened. "Step back." Slate's face flushed again. "This is ridiculous. I am chief resident. You cannot override a medical decision based on sentiment." Brandt's eyes narrowed. "This is not sentiment," he said. "This is risk. The risk of a chief resident freezing during a federal VIP emergency, and then retaliating against the staff member who corrected it." Slate's jaw dropped. "I did not freeze." Maya's voice cut in, quiet but clear. "You did." Slate's gaze snapped to her. "You are on thin ice." Maya's hands shook, but she did not look away. "I have been on thin ice for months," she said. "So has everyone else." A murmur of agreement spread. People were not shouting. They were simply no longer silent. Brant turned fully to Slate. "Hand over your badge," he said. Slate stared at him as if he misheard. "You cannot be serious." Brant's mouth tightened. "Your patient satisfaction scores are the lowest in the department. Staff turnover tied to your shifts is the highest. Complaints have been filed. They were not acted on." Slate's face went slack. "Those are irrelevant metrics." Brant's gaze did not move. "They are not irrelevant when your behavior triggers federal scrutiny." Slate's voice rose cracking. "This is because of her." Brant's eyes flicked to Nora, then back to Slate. "This is because of you," he said. Slate looked around, searching for someone to save him. The interns avoided his gaze. The older nurses watched him with a stillness that felt like judgment. Grant Voss stepped forward one pace, arms folding across his chest. He did not say anything. He did not need to. His presence alone made the threat of escalation real. Brant gestured to Trent, the young security officer who looked terrified and determined at the same time. "Escort Dr. Slate to his locker," Brant said. "He is relieved of duty, pending investigation." Slate's face twisted. "Pending investigation," he spat. "I am a Yale-trained physician." Brant's tone was dry. "Then act like one." Slate ripped his ID badge off his coat and threw it onto the tile. It skidded near Ray's mop bucket. Slate turned to storm out, shoulders rigid with rage. His foot caught the edge of the bucket. He went down hard. The sound of his body hitting the floor was louder than it should have been. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody laughed, nobody rushed to help. Slate pushed himself up, face burning, and for the first time his gait had an ugly hitch. Not a limp born of years, a limp born of a bruise and humiliation. He glared at the room like he wanted to mark every face. Then he limped away. When the doors swallowed him, the department exhaled. Not celebration. Release. The kind people felt when a pressure that had been constant finally stopped pressing. Rowe turned toward Nora again, voice lower now, so it did not belong to the crowd. "You do not have to stay here," he said. Nora's mouth moved, but for a second no words came. Her throat was tight. Brant stepped closer cautiously. Posture careful, like he was approaching a skittish animal he had already harmed. "Ms. Caldwell Brant said your termination is rescinded, effective immediately. We would be honored if you returned to your shift. We can also discuss compensation." Significant compensation. Nora looked at him. Her eyes were tired, but they were clear. "I am not returning to my shift," she said. Brant's face fell. "I understand," he began quickly. "After what happened, we can offer an alternative placement, a lighter assignment perhaps, outpatient." Nora shook her head once. "I am not returning as a floor nurse," she corrected. Brant blinked, then as what? Nora's gaze moved across the trauma bays. She watched Maya standing straighter than she had ever seen her. She watched the interns watching the room like they were seeing it for the first time. She watched a tech pushing a cart with eyes that looked newly awake. "My leg slows me down," Nora said simply. "That part is true." She let that sit without apology. "But my mind is fast," she continued, "and my hands know what to do when the room breaks." Brant's brow tightened. "What are you asking for?" Nora looked at him, and her voice stayed calm. "Training," she said. "I want the education program, real trauma education. How to triage when everything arrives at once. How to treat chest injury when you cannot wait for perfect conditions. How to speak up when the person in charge is wrong." Brant hesitated. Denise's pen hovered over her clipboard. Maya held her breath. Rowe watched Nora with something like quiet approval. Brant swallowed. "Director of Clinical Education," he said slowly, as if the title formed in his mouth and he had to decide whether he could afford it. Nora nodded once, yes. Brant exhaled. "Name your salary." Nora stared at him for a beat, then her mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Fix the break room coffee," she said. "The machine has been broken for months." A few nurses made small sounds of disbelief and amusement that broke the tension. Nora's eyes flicked toward Ray. "And Ray Ellis gets a raise." Ray stiffened, eyes widening. Brant blinked, then nodded quickly. Done. Nora nodded once like a contract had been signed. Rowe stepped closer to Nora, voice quiet. "You did not have to bargain for a coffee machine," he said. Nora's eyes stayed on the bays. "People work better when small things are not constantly broken," she said. Rowe watched her for a beat. "I owe you," he said. Nora shook her head once. "You already paid," she replied, and her fingers brushed the metal coin under her sweater without thinking. Rowe's eyes flicked to the gesture again. He did not ask. The ER resumed its rhythm gradually, like a heart restarting after a shock. A nurse called for meds. A monitor beeped. A stretcher rolled in. Life continued indifferent to justice. But something had changed in the way people looked at Nora as she turned to leave the station. They did not stare at her shoes. They did not whisper about her limp. They watched her like she was a fixed point. Thud, drag, thud, drag. Not a joke now, a signature. Weeks passed without ceremony. No montage announced itself. It happened in the quiet ways change always happened. In meetings that used to be ignored. In drills that used to be optional and now filled the room. In interns who stopped snickering and started asking questions that mattered. Nora's first training session took place in a plain conference room that smelled like dry erase markers and old carpet. The chairs were mismatched. The projector flickered. She stood at the front with a cane, now sleek and simple, because her hip demanded it after long days. She did not hide it. She did not explain it. Maya sat in the front row with a notebook open, eyes locked on Nora's hands. A few interns sat farther back, uncertain, as if expecting a lecture. Nora began without introductions. "Trauma does not wait for your comfort," she said. She wrote on the board with deliberate strokes. Not fancy, not pretty, clear, airway, breathing, circulation. Then she turned and looked at them. "When the room gets loud," she said, "your voice must get quieter. Your hands must get steadier." One intern raised a hand. "Dr. Slate used to say speed is everything." Nora's gaze held his. "Speed matters," she said. "But speed without clarity kills." She did not moralize. She demonstrated. She ran them through scenarios. A bus crash with limited beds. A choking patient when suction failed. A chest injury that turned into a collapsing lung while someone argued about imaging. She made them practice the words that saved lives. Stop, look, listen, decide. Maya watched the interns change in real time, not into better people, but into more prepared ones. In the break room, a new coffee machine appeared one morning, gleaming like a miracle. The smell of decent coffee spread through the hallways and made people smile for reasons they could not explain. Ray's paycheck changed too. He did not mention it. He just worked with a lighter step, and sometimes when Nora passed him in the hallway, he nodded with an expression that looked like gratitude and something older. On a rare, clear morning, Harborview held a small gathering outside the West Wing entrance. The rain had stopped. The sky over Bayport was pale blue, the air sharp and clean, as if the city had been rinsed. A ribbon hung across the entrance to a renovated section of the building. Brant stood to one side, smiling too hard, surrounded by cameras and staff. The senator's office had sent representatives. A few men in suits spoke quietly into earpieces. Rowe stood in the front row beside a woman with kind eyes and a firm posture, his wife. Two teenage girls stood between them, watching everything with solemn curiosity. Nora stepped up to the podium. She wore a navy suit that fit properly, not to hide anything. Her cane rested under her hand. Her hair was pulled back tight. The brace line was visible when the fabric shifted. She did not care. She looked out at the crowd, then down at the ribbon. Brant cleared his throat and began a formal introduction with phrases like visionary and dedication and service. Nora waited until he finished. Then she stepped forward. The microphone amplified the rasp in her voice, making it fill the space. "They told me scars were ugly," she said. The crowd quieted. Nora's eyes moved over faces. Nurses, techs, paramedics, a few doctors. Ray, standing near the backhands, clasped posture straight. "But scars are not ugly." Nora continued. and her voice stayed steady. "They are proof you kept going." Ro's daughters watched her without blinking. Nora turned slightly and looked up at the new sign over the renovated entrance. The letters were crisp, bright against the building's older stone. Caldwell Trauma Education and Response Center. Brant shifted, pleased. Nora looked back at the crowd. "This is not for me," she said. "This is for the people who keep this place alive when nobody is watching." She did not say more than that. She did not stretch the moment. She did not need to. Brant handed her the ceremonial scissors. The metal was cool in her palm. Nora took one breath, then cut the ribbon. The crowd applauded not because they were told to, but because something inside them wanted to. Ro approached, after moving through the crowd with quiet purpose. He stopped in front of Nora and looked at her the way he had looked at her at the bus stop, like he was trying to reconcile time with reality. "You did not change," he said softly. Nora's mouth twitched. "I did," she replied, "just not in the way people wanted." Ro's wife extended a hand. "Thank you," she said, voice warm and firm. Nora took her hand carefully. Her grip was strong. Ro's daughters stared at Nora's cane, then at Nora's face. One of them spoke, voice small. "Did it hurt?" Nora looked down at her, the honesty in the question familiar. "Yes," Nora said. The girl's brows knit. Was it worth it? Nora paused, not for drama, but because the question was real. She looked up at Ro. She looked at the West Wing entrance. She looked at Maya across the crowd, smiling in a way Nora had never seen before. Nora answered simply. It was necessary, she said. The girl nodded, like she accepted that kind of truth. Later, when the crowd thinned and the cameras moved on, Nora returned inside. The corridor smelled like disinfectant and coffee, now a strange combination that felt like Harborview learning how to breathe. She walked down the hall, cane tapping softly, limp, still present, still hers. Tap, tap, thud. Not hidden, not mocked. Maya caught up to her near the trauma bay's hair pulled back, eyes bright. Director Maya said teasing but respectful. Nora glanced at her. "Do not call me that," she replied. Maya grinned. "Everyone is calling you that." Nora's expression softened slightly. "Then everyone can stop," she said. Maya walked beside her, matching pace without hovering. "The interns are in the sim room," she said. "They asked if you would run the airway drill again." Nora nodded once. "Good." They passed the central station where Slate used to stand. The spot looked ordinary now. Just a counter, a computer, a phone. The red secure phone still sat there, dust-gone handset clean. Nora's gaze flicked to it for a brief moment, then away. Ro stood near the entrance of the sim room waiting. Not in dress uniform now, just a simple jacket posture still unmistakable. "You do not have to keep showing up," Nora said as she approached. Ro's mouth curved faintly. "I know," he replied. Nora looked at him, eyes tired, amused, and sharp all at once. "Then why are you here?" Ro held her gaze. "Because I do not leave teammates behind," he said. Nora exhaled something that was almost a laugh, but not quite. "You are persistent," she said. Ro nodded. "So are you." Nora turned toward the sim room. Inside, the intern stood around a mannequin, gloves on, eyes nervous. They looked up when she entered, and for once their faces did not carry arrogance. They carried attention. Nora stepped to the table and placed her hands on the mannequin's chest. Her fingers were steady. Her voice was calm. "All right," she said, again.